Hi, welcome to another HOFA-College studio workshop. Today we're going to talk about compression. That's an interesting topic, of course, and this is not a beginner's workshop, so we're going to deal with some more sophisticated techniques of compression. And I want to start today with talking about three important things I have to say about compression. And these topics are, first, you have to know what you want when you start compressing. When you work with compression, you have to understand what your goal is, what you're aiming for. And there are two main approaches for compression. You can either go for dynamic control. That's what the most compression, the most times when I use compression is to control dynamics, and but the other goal is to change the sound, to go to use the compressor as a sound shaping tool, and that's pretty interesting. Another thing I think that's very important about compression is to understand the importance of the control times, especially attack and release times. That's not identical in every compressor, and there are really things you can do wrong and things you can do right, and that's important to know and important to understand, and even more important to hear what's happening when you change control times, when you switch to fast or slow attack times or release times, what's happening with your sound. And the next important topic before we really actually start listening to music and to compression is to understand and to know your signal flow. When you're using dynamic tools like a compressor, it's really important where in the signal flow it is located. Is it placed before or after the EQ? Is it placed before or after other dynamic tools? What does affect the compressor? For example, if I have an EQ before a compressor, it really changes a lot. When I turn in some low frequencies, for example, the more energy there is in the low frequency range, the more a compressor is affected. And that's really important to understand when you use compressors in a certain signal line with other plugins like EQs, like other dynamic tools like a limiter or whatever. So that's enough words and that's enough mere talking. Now I want to start listening to music. Well, it's not exactly music what I'm starting with, but it's just a mere drum sound. And I want to start with an example that is about using compressor as a sound shaping tool. It's not my goal to control the dynamics of the snare in this example, but to affect the sound. And I have a rather basic drum pattern which sounds like that. No big thing, just bass drum, snare and hi-hat, and a little bit of overhead and ambience tracks. And while the kick drum is already processed with EQ and compressor, the snare has nothing in it. There's only, I see the transient shaper has been active. Just listen again without that. All right. Now the snare sounds like I accepted it. It's a little bit soft and not really punchy, and I want to use the the compressor and other dynamic tools to make it more punchy, to give it a little bit more attack. This is not a heavy metal drum set, of course, but still the sound needs to be more punchy. It needs more transient, and to work out the transients of a sound, a compressor is a really nice tool. Before we do that, I start with an EQ. No big thing. Just a little bit more in the high mid in the present range, and a little scoop in the mid range around 400 Hertz. Then there's a compressor. And I really love to use the preset of the IQ series comps snare, bite, and trigger high. And that's really doing what's the name is saying. And yeah, let's start just by listening. You can see that it's doing something. Turn it off. Yes, something is happening. And what is happening? This is a compressor with a rather long attack, medium, not really long attack time, and a short release time. And yeah, the compressor lets the transients of the snare drum pass, and after that the compression takes place, and that leads to a really more punchy and more transient snare sound. I will exaggerate a bit. Now I hear it really clear what it's doing. That's too much. Don't overdo it like that. But I think it shows what's happening. Okay, just let me show the snare in solo. Without and with. Now there's something more I can do. This is, the compressor is just working in a full range mode. It's affecting all frequencies just in a similar way. And you can use the color button of this compressor to affect the frequencies. And you can see it here in the display. I will show you. Let me make it a little bit more. So that's too much, like I said before, don't overdo it. But you can hear that in the moment when the snare is playing, and just at the start, when the compressor is taking action, the fundamental tone of the snare drum here below 200 Hertz and the high frequencies are boosted just for a short second, just for the moment of the transients, and then the boost goes back again to zero. And just listen to it without that color mode and with it. And just listen to it like it was without any compression. And with. And it makes the drums much more punchy and powerful. With compression and without. There's no punch at all. Okay, in the next instance, I'm using sometimes, it's always an option, but it's not really a must, but I sometimes use a limiter just to get rid of the very, very loud peaks. this is a limiter has the advantage of not working with really long and audible control times, but it's really kind of fast. And it's just keeping control of the very hard peaks and nothing else. Just an idea for you to combine a limiter with a compressor. And I want to show you something that I think it's not actually a compressor, but it's doing this task of shaping the transients in a really, really nice way. And that's, of course, a transient shaper. And a transient shaper is a dynamic tool, like a compressor, and it's using the functionality of a compressor in working with time-based controls that are working with attack and release times to shape the transients and the sustain of a snare drum or a bass drum or even other signals. And yeah, that's what is happening here. You can see something's happening. I'm just turn it up a bit. Okay, now you can hear it's a little bit over the top, but still, yeah, something like that might work. You always have to be aware that the level of the snare drum gets a little bit higher when you're working with a strong transient boost. Yeah, something like that might work, and that's the first way of working with a compressor on drum sounds, especially to work out the transients and to make it more punchy and more powerful. I have another example I just want to show you really quick. It's a more heavy drum sound here. And you can tell that the snare drum doesn't sound really, there's not much attack on the snare drum, on the snare sound. And when you turn off the reverb, it sounds even more like a tin can or whatever. So there's something that needs to be done. Again, we turn on an EQ just to make it a little bit more punchy in the low end or in the fundamental range. And then, like before, the compressor, and it already shows where we want to go. And then again, a transient shaper, even more, and I use a transient shaper also to work on the sustain and of the snare drum, just to make it a little bit shorter. Or that was the wrong direction. Just to make it a little bit more compact and tight. And after that, again, a last tip for snare drums. Sometimes you can work, when you're working with a transient shaper or a transient designer or whatever you call it, the signals gets louder and the peaks are a little bit too loud. And it might be a good idea to work with a clipper. That's here in the IQ comp. And this is working really nicely just to get rid of the fast peaks without really destroying the transients of the drums. Add some reverb, and now it sounds like a snare drum, especially together with the other sounds. Listen to it without and with. And I think that's quite a difference, and that's the way to use compressors when you want to shape the sound, especially of drum sounds, to make them more transient rich, more punchy, more powerful in the mix. And they cut through the mix, especially in a powerful metal or rock song, much easier when they have those transients. So that's aspect one of using compressors to shape your sound to get more transients. The next one, and I want to use a bass drum and a drum sound again to show this. The next goal is to control the dynamics. As I said before, this is in most cases, this is the point where we use compressors to control the dynamics, to make signals more stable, more solid in the mix. And yeah, that's where the next example comes in. So let me activate it. This is a bass drum recording from, it's like half a verse, and it's really dynamic. You can tell when you look at the waveforms that there is some, there are loud beats and less loud beats. Sometimes it gets a little bit up and down. So yeah, it's dynamic. Of course, there's some musical dynamic, like there are accents on the one, bop, 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 bop. But still, it's really, there are a big difference between single beats. Here again. And we have to control these dynamics. We have to make them, more solid, more stable, to squeeze it a little bit together. And that's where something comes in that I talked before, control times. While we used really slow attack times on the snare drum compressor to make the transients stand out more and to make them more punchy, this is the other way around. I need very fast attack times to really get every part of the bass drum, and not in fact to not use the very first transients of the signal. And that's why I use a master limiter as a very first plug-in in the chain, just to get rid of the peaks. The fast peaks are very easily controlled with a master limiter. So you can see there are already reductions of 2 to 3 dB. Yeah, 2.5. I think there's another 0.5. I think there is another. Yeah, this one is 3 dB. So you see, a little bit is happening. Not everything is done with just one master limiter, but just to flatten it a little bit and to get rid of some loud peaks. In the next step, a EQ. you can argue whether this is the right order for in a signal chain to work with a master limiter in front of an EQ. In this example, I did it like that, just to make it a little bit cleaner in the low mid and in the mid range. Okay, just start again. It's a bit more precise, that's all. And then again a compressor, and this time with a really, really fast attack time. It's so fast that it's ahead of the signal. No, to be serious, this is a look ahead function of a compressor, and it's working with a slightly delayed signal of the bass drum to know in advance that there will be a drum beat very soon, and it's working ahead, so there's no no attack time that's audible, and so it's really much faster, and it's really a good way to work with very dynamic signals, especially for drums. So it's doing a lot, but as you may see, here's something really interesting. That's the mix level, and you can also say it's a dry-wet control. You can work with that when you want to make some parallel compression, actually. And this is really nice to make a very solid and stable drum signal and add it to the still dynamic signal. And in 100%, it would sound like that. That's, of course, too much compression. So let's go back to the 44% of the compression. Yeah, and that's like it sounds without. And now we can start to hear that even these quiet parts are still more audible and more in your face, so to say, and they get a little bit more stable. And stability is something, and that's I think it's a rather cool tool to replace a compressor or to assist a compressor, let's say it like that. That's a saturator. Saturation is working with the, let's say, distortion. It's adding harmonics, overtones to a signal, and it's simulating machines like tapes, tube amps, whatever. And it's a natural kind, well, not natural, it's another way of compression and of reducing dynamics without control times. And that's why it's so nice to work with it on drums. And I'm using this one as a tape saturation, a simulated tape saturation. And yeah, it's working like that. That's the sound without anything, and that's with. Let's go to the very dynamic part. And with again. So the differences between loud beats and soft beats are really not as strong as before. And the interesting thing is to watch this on the waveform. And that's why I really think it's a good idea just to get a visual form of the result, to export it So, and I use this here. Just here we go. And I export it as a mono down mix since it is a mono track, and we can see it much more clearly when we compare them. And I create an audio track, that's right. Okay, here we go. So, this is the compressed form, waveform. I'm turn it up a little bit just to see it more clearly. And when you compare these two signals with this signal, you can see that the difference between quiet and loud parts is and beats is much smaller, and that's what compression, saturation, limiting is used for. And that's the way to go for very dynamic drums. Just a tip for dynamic drum signals: you always have to keep in mind, what's your goal? Do you want to shape the sound, or do you want to control the dynamics? Sometimes you want to do both, and then you have to combine those two approaches to compression. So, yeah, that's this part of my workshop with the drums. Now I really would like to go to the next step, and that's what I think a lot of people are interested in, is vocal compression. And yeah, just let me switch to the next project. Here we go with it. Lead vocals. All right. So this is a vocal tracks. It's one of our last, or the one before the last Xmas contest songs that's been sung by David Reedman. He's been a singer for several bands, from Pink Cream 69 to various hard rock and metal bands in this region here, but in all over Europe. And yeah, he did this song for us, and it has, of course, some dynamics. You can see there is there is a quieter part in the beginning, and there are some loud peaks in the later parts. And yeah, just listen to some phrases of this.
Down to nothing's Christmas time, but even space, oh God, I got a million miles to ride.
Or a louder part.
I know you are waiting.
So, and yeah, first tip at this place: don't try to do the whole compression in one stage. That's too much. And a really easy way to make life easier for the compressor is to use your editing tools and to cut the waveforms or the clip or the track, and to reduce the clip gain of some of these very loud signals. You can see that there is a lot of dynamic difference between those loud parts, and a really good way to make life easier for the compressor is to use the clip gains. You cut out different parts. For example, the whole part of the last chorus is a little louder than the beginning, and you just reduce the volume of this clip, or not boost it, but rather reduce it. And that can be, of course, done more precisely than I do it now, but it's a really useful way to prevent that the compressor is working too audibly, and that you can hear the compressor working. And that's something you don't want, especially in this one, because in this song, in this recording, this was a really almost old school rock song and we wanted an organic sound for this song, for the vocals, and we don't want it to sound heavily compressed and with pumping compressor sounds, but we wanted to control the dynamics, but to keep it organic and natural and realistic. So I don't use an EQ here, but just to show you some things with the compressor. Like before with the bass drum, we have our goal is to control the dynamics so we don't use too long attack times. No look ahead in this case, but a very fast attack time and a longer, and in this case adaptive release time for the vocals in this case. And it's set to the default mode and no ratio, and the threshold is off. So let's take a look.
Down to nothing's Christmas time, but here in space, oh God, I got a million miles to ride.
Okay, nothing's happening, of course, just a very, very slight compression. Let's go.
Down to nothing's Christmas time, but here in space, oh God, I got a million miles to ride.
Okay, there's something happening now. So let's maybe take a look at those parts with louder parts, phrases. Okay, and now we're getting to a point when you will ask me how much compression is good and how do I know that it's enough or that it's too much. I think when a compressor starts reducing 10 dB or more, you're really at a point where it's enough, let's say it like that. And if you're not sure about it, really do less compression and not more. 10 dB of compression on a vocal track, even it's a good compressor and really unobtrusive, almost inaudible compression, it's 10 dB is a little bit too much. The control times and the control movements and going the levels back to zero reduction, they are audible, and that's something you don't want to hear. So keep your compression in values, that's not much more than 10 dB. But as you can see, we had not much compression in the first part.
Down to nothing's Christmas time, but here in space, oh God, I got a million miles to ride.
But much more compression in the louder part.
I know you.
And so, as I said before, it might be a good idea to use the cutting tool and to compress the louder parts with a different setting, or with to use a clip gain to reduce the income of this clip to the compressor. And I think it might work perfectly to put the loud vocal parts on another track. Just copy the settings, one here, and then you have a loud vocal part, and that's it. And now you can set this compressor for this part in a different way than in the first part. That's not, of course, not a perfect mix here. Just as a tip, in your mixes, use different settings and use different channels even when you have very dynamic vocals. One channel for the quieter parts and one for the louder parts, or even 3 channels when it's really, really very dynamic. You might even use different EQ settings for a louder or a quieter part. It won't work when you have a very dynamic vocal track and you want to do all in one channel with just one compressor and squeeze the sound like a, whatever, like very strong. So compression is dependent on the main controls like threshold, of course, how much input signals coming in via the input and the ratio via the input. The ratio is another important factor. I guess all of you know that. And of course, the attack time and the release time are really, really important factors. We wanted to have a rather inaudible compression, so we used a fast attack time for this one. We can even go to really completely fast, and medium, relatively long release time. In this case, the release time is adaptive.
Down to nothing's Christmas time, but
Oh, that's a wrong one. I want to see this.
here in space, oh God, I got a million miles to ride.
And adaptive means that it's adapting to the conditions. If it doesn't have to do a lot, it's moving really slow. The more it has to do,
But high above am I.
you can see the reduction is moving faster up and down. And that's a cool thing you can use on vocal tracks when you have rather slow compression, but if it's working more and the reduction is stronger, the release time is also moving faster. And that's another tip. Use compressors who can do that. Many optimode compressors do work like that, and that's a good way to compress vocals that are supposed to sound organic and natural. Let me move to another example. This one was the old school and organic vocal sound approach. I want to now move to a more modern approach, let's say it like that. And this one's also from a Xmas contest song, this example, but this was a more electronic song. And I just want to show you first the recorded and raw vocals without any compression.
Have you heard the story that is being told right now? Have you heard this rumor's going round? Heard about big relief for those who can't believe.
As you can hear and see in the waveform, there's a lot of differences between loud and quiet words and phrases. And of course, we don't want to get rid of all these differences. For a modern pop song, electronically produced pop song, you may want to have a more stable and very dense and in-your-face vocal sound. And just let me show you how you can get there. Again, we start with EQing. At this time, we start with a very sophisticated way of EQing, but that's maybe a little bit too strong. But dynamic EQing is a perfect tool to again make life easier for the compressor. If the dynamic of the or spectral dynamics are flattened a bit, you can make it easier for the compressor to work in a full range of the spectrum. And there are always some frequency ranges, especially in vocal recordings, when the mid-range or a higher mid-range gets a little bit too loud. And that's something you can really nicely control with a dynamic EQ. And that's the first step in this one. So let's start with this. Oops, sorry. Here we go. Come on.
Have you heard the story that is being told right now? Have you heard?
You can see there's something happening in these frequency ranges, and that's the dynamic control of these bands around 350 hertz with in the low mid range, and at 670, yeah, that's a mid range.
This rumor's going round.
So that's first access point for dynamic control.
The story that is being told right now.
So being and told, these two words, and at that point the dynamic EQs are working. And the next step, again, a compressor. This time I'm using the system compressor, and it's close to the IQ series comp, but it's not identical, and it's more basic and it's more really easy and understandable interface, and that's why I often just grab this one because it's so easy to handle. So there are two things you should maybe understand when working with these compressors. They have two modes. There's one time a channel compressor, and sometimes you can switch to a sum compressor. That's like a master bus compressor or even or a channel compressor. And with the other example, we used the mode of a master bus compressor. This one is using a channel compressor, which is working in a more aggressive and more audible way. That's what I want in this one. And so, yeah, it's again has a very fast attack time, very short attack time to be precise. And in this case, a very short release.
The story that is being told right now. Have you heard? This rumor's going round.
Okay, again, I turn it off.
The story that is being told right now. Have you heard?
Told by now and have you heard? These two examples these two words are really good examples for compression.
Story that is being told right now.
Now, told is of course the strongest compression.
The story that is being told right now.
And now it's starting to get more balanced when I turn off both the dynamic EQ and the compressor.
The story that is being told right now.
The told gets louder and even more what a honky a little bit, and the mid-range is louder, and that's what the IQ and the compressor are doing at this part. And I talked about using other tools than compressors for compression, and again it's a saturator, which is a really nice tool even for vocals when you want to get highly compressed and highly dense sounds and add some character.
The story that is being told right now. Have you heard? This rumor's going round.
And just start from the beginning where the phrase is really low.
Have you heard? The story that is being told right now.
And compare this to the unprocessed version.
Have you heard? The story that is being told right now.
Yeah, and there's much more movement and much more dynamics. And when you imagine a really strong electronic playback, then you can imagine that the soft phrase in the beginning would get a little lost and without compression. And yeah, that's where saturation, compression, and dynamic EQing comes handy. And something again, which I did in the drum example before, I'm using the saturator in a parallel way. It's only a ratio of 30% of the wet signal. And so if you're using this in full range, it's too much distortion.
Have you heard the story that is being told right now?
All right, here I'm back on track, and I'm sorry for the interruption. We had some problems with our microphone. I hope it's working now again. And you're back there, and you're still there on your screens. So, yeah, let's go on with the stuff we had before. And I was just talking about using the saturator in parallel mode, and this is really something that's a powerful tool when you want to use heavy compression, heavy saturation, heavy editing, processing on your sounds without losing the naturalness of the signal. And that's why I choose a saturator with really strong saturation, but only with a 30% wet signal. And I just was showing you this, and I'll do it again in case we missed it.
Have you heard the story?
In parallel mode, and now move to full 100%.
Have you heard the story that is being told right now?
Even though it's a really nice and very analog sounding tape saturation, it's still too much. Go back to 30%. Yeah, here we go.
Have you heard the story that is being told right now? Have you heard this rumor's going round?
Yeah, and that's something that you can use on a lot of modern vocals, pop vocals, female, male vocals, but also on, let's say, rap vocals for hip-hop tracks. Fast attack times, fast release times. There are some compressors that are really, very special for that, like a Uri or the 1176 or 78 in the original hardware version. And you can also use channel comms from our system or IQ series and that's a good way to work on very dynamic vocals that you want to control in a way that you can hear and that makes some sound, and that also adds some harmonics with saturation. That's happening with the saturator, of course, but also with fast attack times and fast release times of your compressor. That's always that always results in some distortion and some harmonics, and that's always used as some kind of character for vocal compression. So maybe as a resume, use fast release times when you want to hear or to hear some distortion and to get some character in your signal, and you want to really control the dynamics of the signal. All right, so that's for this vocal track. And now, since we've been talking about parallel processing, I want to use another drum sound for this thing and to show you the idea of parallel compression. That's this project. Okay, here we go. And that's a drum beat that sounds a little bit dull without any further processing. And it's not really played really loud, and it's sounds a little bit too soft. And if you want to add some character and some punch to it, a very good idea might be to use parallel compression, and I prepared that already and just want to show you how it works. That's with the compression and without. And I think you hear the difference. And just let me show you how this is done. So we have a channel in the mixing board. Here it is. And inside the channel, there is a compressor. And this compressor is really working a lot, as you can see. And even another saturator is inserted after the compressor. And that adds some nice overtones, and it's even turned a bit up with the tone control. So this channel is working in parallel, like it said. And how is this done? It's actually pretty easy, and it's a old trick from the 1980s, I think, even 70s maybe. That was first done in New York. That's why many people talk of New York compression when they talk of that parallel compression, especially for drums, but not only for drums. The way we used the saturator on the vocal track before, it's also been some kind of parallel compression. And okay, then, let me show you. We have a mixed view here now, and this is the fader. That's not the interesting thing, but when we switch to the send, we can see that there are two sends. One is for the reverb. That's not the interesting thing right now, but there's one send that's going directly to the para comp channel, and as you remember, there is the compressor and the saturator in this channel. It's like a effect channel in your mixing board. You mostly use reverbs or delays on those effect channels, but you can also use it for a parallel compression. And the send is on full stuff, 0 dB, and it's only on bass drum and snare and nothing else. It's so if you listen to the compressed signal alone, it's a little bit quieter now, so I turn up the volume. This is just the compressed signal. It's only bass drum and snare, but since it's so strongly compressed, it also adds up the crosstalk on the snare microphones from hi-hat, and you even hear the ambience a little bit in the room. That's where it's been recorded. And if you listen to that without the parallel compression and with, it adds so much character and punch and power to the sound. It's really, I think it's really, really useful for drums like that need that. And you have to be careful a little bit, because of course it's making the signal louder a bit, but not really that much. Let's check the level of this. You can see where is it here? This is my stereo out, and the peak level is at 3.9 dB. And when I turn off the compression, so it's 5.8, and it's 1.9 dB quieter than the compressed signal, but it's so much more than just 2 dB difference between this sound, and that sound. So that's a really good way to use compressors, and an easy way after you have understood the way you have to use it. It's just an effect channel and 1 or 2 or 3 or how many cents ever you want to use, and that's it. Squeeze and push the signal with a saturator and with a compressor and add it in parallel to the unprocessed drums, and that's New York compression. That's a really nice way to use compression if you want to hear really strong compression and still keep the original signal natural. So that's one part of my workshop. We have talked about compression for sound design, for sound shaping, for transient shaping. We have talked about compression for dynamic control, work with different attack and especially release times when you want to achieve different results for vocal sounds, for example. And we have talked about parallel compression, which is a powerful tip in my opinion. And we also have talked about saturation, which is a nice add-on for compression, especially in these days for modern sounds. When I listen to many mixes of the last 4, 5 or even more years, I always hear that there's a lot of saturation going on. That's maybe because there has been so much clear and digital sounds for many years after switching from analog production to digital productions like 30 years ago. Many years the production have been too clean and too perfect, maybe even, and that's what a lot of people have been missing. That analog feel of productions, and many mixers and producers these days use saturation to get rid of that digital sound and to get a more analog feel in their productions. Up to now, we have only been talking about compressors on single signals like a bass drum, a snare, a vocal, or in a parallel compression group. But as a final issue, I want to now talk about bass compression, because this is something completely different and a really important tip for everybody who's working with the compressors in mixes. Just here we go. Let me open this project. Bass compression on groups or in master channels is something completely different. While when you use a compressor on a vocal track, it's only affecting the vocal track. But when you use a compressor on a group track or a master bus, you will always affect the whole thing that's in that group, in that bus. And if a loud bass drum hit is triggering the compression and the level is reduced, it's not only affecting the bass drum, but also the guitars, the keyboard, the bass, whatever is in the group. And that's why you have to be really, really careful when working with group compressors. And that's why we also normally use different control triumphs for bus compressors. And I want to show you just one little example I've prepared for that. And that's a compressor in a playback group. And the playback is rather dynamic, not overly dynamic, but we switch here from a chorus part to an interlude and then back to chorus again. Just let's listen for a few seconds. switch to the transgression. And then back to the louder part again. As you can see, there's not happening much. It's just like 1.3, maybe 1.5 dB of reduction in the louder part. Let me explain what's happening. You can see there's a really long, rather long attack time of 22 and a full release level of 100%. And this means it's really going slow. Let me show you this with a little bit more. So you can see the beginning of the reduction has been very fast, and now it's going on and on and on and on. It's still not at really zero. Still not, but come on. Now. Okay. It's took like 10-15 seconds going back from a strong reduction to zero reduction. And that's what is mostly used on bus compressors, because this is not meant to control single signals like one single bass drum hit or a loud vocal phrase or whatever, but it's used to level parts at each other, to get a balance over a song, to level the dynamics of quiet parts and loud parts like verses, pre-choruses, chorus parts, and so on. And this is not to make the whole song louder or to control individual channels. There are different approaches for that. You need individual compressors and individual channels like vocals, like a snare drum, like a drum channel maybe also, and you need something like limiter or a master limiter in master channels to make a mix louder, to gain more loudness, but to level the dynamics of a song and to balance the different parts to each other. That's what master bus compression is made for or is used for. And if you use that too much, like that, what I just did for an example, this was way too much, of course, but many people use a compressor maybe like that. And that's too much, like 6 or 7 dB in a group compression, even though it's a very smooth compressor, is way too much. Usually, take it as a rule, in a playback group or even in a master bus, a master bus stereo compressor shouldn't reduce more than 2 or max 3 dB. That's often enough. When you ask any mastering engineer how much his mastering compressor is reducing, he will say like 2 dB max. And that's what you have to keep in mind when using compressors on group channels, on playback groups or instrument groups, or even in the master channel. Keep it low. Not too much reduction. Dynamic control in vocals and drums is made in the vocals and in the drums, and loudness is achieved with a mastering limiter. And that's the compressor is a different tool for that. But it's really important to make a musical balance between parts, and even to make for a little glue in the signal, like to add something to the signal that's really nice, a little bit of ambient that is added to the signal by the compression, and that makes really for a nice but very subtle sound coloration. So that's it for me today with this workshop, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience in between when our microphone was not working, but I think it went pretty fast. So if you have any more questions about compressors, about audio engineering, about how to use dynamic tools and other tools in the mix, learn more about it with our courses if you want to, or learn more about our college, our HOFA-College at hofa-college.com. Feel free to mail us, to call us if you have any questions. I hope you liked it today, and see you next time. Bye-bye.